Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast with Scott and Dan. I'm Scott, and with me, as almost always, the ring-tossing amateur to my New York Yankees, it's Dan. Hey, Dan.
Hey, good evening.
Well, I said ring-tossing amateur. I didn't say twin, so...
Yeah. Or Robbie Williams.
Or Sugar Ray. Anyway... We are going way beyond inside baseball. We're just joking about things that
Yes, we're going outside baseball, actually.
Well, nowadays there is no baseball, so you can just. Although I have to say, there's been a treasure trove of different games to watch every day and night on MLB Network. So that's been pretty cool. So you
still get to see your Yankees beat the Twins in the playoffs fix this year. Nice.
I think they have an entire network just devoted to that because this happened so many times. It's like, is this a rerun? No. This is just the 14th time. No, no, we kid. So, speaking of baseball towns, we're going to be joined by folks in a couple hot baseball towns. First, joining us tonight, the feisty queen of the tornado shelter in place herself, Jamie is here. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, here I am. I'm here.
Have you had enough to drink yet, or are you still too sober to move forward?
I'm good. I'm about halfway. I'm going to toss it over. I'm going to toss it over to someone else is here who is my same opposite and my kindred spirit in musical chaos. It's Bri, the Justice Guy.
Wow.
I said, hey, Jamie. What an introduction.
I was not expecting.
Can't top that.
I told you, let me get halfway through my drink first, bud.
Wow, if Brian's going to take Dan's spot, I think Jamie might be taking my spot. Holy shit. Fuck. Wow, what a better podcast this would be.
I know I've learned that half a drink is the amount of alcohol you have to consume to introduce Brian without insulting him, so I'll have to try that sometime.
Give it a shot.
But oddly enough, if you drink another half a drink, you go right back to insulting him twice as bad.
Listen, Dan, we can't all be juice box heroes, okay?
Hey, it was a pouch.
Wow, juice. Look at the... Half a drink and she's punning. She's cunning with her punning over there.
You should see me play pool after one drink. It's a whole other world.
Wow.
After 2 drinks, I can't play anymore. So you got me in the good spot. Let's roll.
You are
but one of your drinks is usually water without ice, so there's that.
I have sensitive teeth, bud.
Jeez. Single-handedly changing my mind about girls from the Midwest. Jeez. But maybe not. So, yeah, we are... So, yes, we are making it through yet another week of, nation and world under lockdown or whatever is going on out there. Is everybody doing okay so far? I don't know if anyone had any actual stories at this point, but I just want to make sure everyone's okay. I'm sure our listeners care.
Hanging in there.
Doing okay. Just got a notice today there will be no court in Kentucky in person until June 1st. So,
jeez, June. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I've been on a combination of hiking and then just mildly cracking up every few days for a little bit and then getting over it. So there's that. Work is very busy. People got to get their chicken now.
That's right. Chicken is essential. You know that.
And how's it going for you over in Kick the Twins Assville?
Oh, here in the once again the New York getting to be ground zero for something. Um, uh, yeah, it hasn't been great, here in epicenter land. When I have ventured out, and I do from time to time, there'll be like maybe a day or two, a couple days in a row where I haven't gone outside at all, except maybe to throw out garbage or something, and then there'll be a day where I have to go out like 3 or 4 times. And sometimes I go out wearing, the bandana wrapped around my face, or sometimes I've had gloves on, sometimes I don't have them on. It really depends on if I know what I'm doing and where I'm going. And because I said, well, if I know I'm not really going to be coming into contact with anything or intend to, it's like, okay, just go out and, wash your hands when you get home, or sanitize, or have the little thing of sanitizer in my pocket, whatever. So, I mean, I think we're all. It's a very strange thing, especially when you live in a place like New York, because this is a place that even if you're not in the middle of the hustle and bustle of the city, there still is always tons of people walking around everywhere. So it is unusual when you go out and there either just is nobody or practically nobody. And when you do see people walking around, they're wearing, surgical masks and gloves, and they're doing their best not to come in contact with you. Oh, by the way, I really like that part. So
You should do your Breaking Bad right now. That'd be perfect.
Oh, I've gone outside with the mask on. Oh, it's been great.
Oh, fuck yeah.
people freaked out. It's great. I've done that twice, just for the hell of it. And yeah, I mean, as you guys and a few folks out there who I guess are friends of mine on Facebook are aware, also affected me personally, because I found out like a week or two ago that my mother had been taken to the hospital, and she had the COVID-19, and she's obviously, I shouldn't say obviously because you guys don't know her, she's in a high risk category based on her age and a number of different pre-existing health conditions that she already had. But as far as that's concerned, it gets frustrating sometimes because all you can do is try to call the hospital every day to get an update, and sometimes there might be a few days in a row where you can't get anybody on the phone. It's because quite often the hospitals are kind of overwhelmed, so they're not even able to pick up the phone, or they pick up the phone and they put you on hold, and you're on hold for like 40 minutes, and after a while it's like, should I stay on hold? I don't know what to do here. And you don't want to be with them because you know what they're in the middle of dealing with. But that said, for the most part, except for pretty much anyone I've talked to at the hospital has been very nice. And I did speak to a doctor today, in fact. So my mother is doing well. She's been stable. She had been on oxygen, and the issue was they were not able to wean her off it for a while, and that was troubling them. But now I believe she is off the oxygen, so she's able to breathe fine on her own. Their only concern is that she's not very mobile right now, so they're worried that she might need some form of rehab or physical therapy as far as just getting around. But beyond that, as far as the actual virus is concerned, but we seem to be maybe a tick or two beyond being cautiously optimistic now. It seems like she's on the other side of it. So it's, I mean,
News.
so it's pretty much, it's mostly good news. There's a lot of other issues that are going to have to be dealt with that are issues of bureaucracy and stuff, which are a bit too much to talk about on a podcast. But as far as life and death are concerned, it looks like right now the survivor that my mother is yet again has pulled through, and she seems to be doing fine. They actually hooked me up with this Google Duo app, and then they contacted me a few hours later, and a nurse who was in like full hazmat-like gear, basically like a FaceTime video on my phone, and she brought her phone into my mother's room. So I did see my mother today. A little startling, but at least I could see she's, her alive. And, I could see she was really out of it. And luckily, as a result, I didn't have to talk to her too long because I don't like talking to my mother that much. And no, I kid because I'm a horrible son. But anyway, she's doing well. So that's good news so far. So that's kind of a bit of a relief considering I've been kind of stressing out about this, among other things, for the last few weeks. So maybe now the fact that half my body is covered in hives they'll start to recede finally. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, lovely image I just gave you.
Well, Scott, that is awesome news, and I think the cure to get your mind off of it is to talk about a wonderful episode of Better Call Saul.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that a segue I hear? Oh my! You see, they do segues, they do introductions. I'm telling you, we're in trouble. You know, and next month we're gonna have to pay the next year for the fees, and maybe we'll do a GoFundMe for that. Anyway, okay. As Brian, heir to the throne over there said, we are here to talk about something other than Corona this or Shimarona that, whatever. Let's get to it. Let's talk about the latest episode of Better Call Saul. And indeed, the latest episode of Better Call Saul was titled Bad Choice Road. It was written and directed by Thomas Schnauz. I just love his name. I don't know if it's Schnauz or Schnauz, but I don't care. It's great to pronounce no matter how you pronounce it. We've talked about him a million times on this podcast. He's a veteran of both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. More known as a writer, but definitely as a director as well. Done lots of great episodes. IMDb him, you'll see what we mean. All right, I'm going to kind of break my usual precedent as of late and do kind of a rundown of the episode here. Set the clock for me. I'm going to try to get this done in just a couple minutes, and then you guys can be treated to hear everyone else talk for the rest of the podcast. Just because I just love this episode so much. So, basically, in a nutshell, much like Moses and the Jews from so many millennia ago, Jimmy and Mike make their way through and out of the desert. Jimmy's armed and prepared for the story of his delay being due to car trouble and having to walk rather than hitch a ride with 2 giant duffel bags with $7 million in cash. He pays Lalo's bail and returns home to Kim, who's so concerned about him she's even willing to let a few obvious lies go by. But Jimmy's adventures in the desert continue to have echoes and consequences, like when we see he's really not okay with definite signs of post-traumatic stress syndrome and clearly not able to slip back into Saul Goodman attorney at law mode. These life-changing vibrations affect Kim as well, who we know has spent all season being less and less interested in banking law in Mesa Verde and feeling more galvanized and fulfilled by her pro bono work. This scare with Jimmy is the final push for her to do what she really wants. So she quits Schweikart and Coakley, leaving behind the firm and her single mega client Mesa Verde. Now, stepping outside those consequences, we do get a key moment between Mike and Gus as he reports back what had transpired, and a question I have to confess, Dan apparently rightfully had asked after the podcast, I don't think he was mentioned on the podcast, unfortunately, because he would have looked so smart, man. So smart. And I mocked you, I think, a little bit for wondering about this. God damn it. You were right to question it. Dan had asked about what was the deal with who were those guys who had attacked Jimmy in the desert to try to steal the money. That is actually addressed. It's revealed that Juan. Oh, did you want to say something? That's okay.
Well, yeah, just the episode was so intense. I didn't even consider it while I was watching it. Like I was just, I never thought about like what the hell was going on. I was just, so I guess it showed how good it was and how excellent a job they did get. But even like Jimmy's perspective, because he probably wasn't thinking like, who are these guys? He's probably just like, okay,
right. It makes perfect sense. Talk about tension-filled episodes. Back to this one. But it's revealed that Juan Bolsa, and I was going to say Don Juan Bolsa, but I wasn't sure if he had such a designation. It's hard to say Juan Bolsa. He was the guy behind the men who tried to steal the $7 million. Mike also tries to get Nacho and his dad out from under Gus's thumb, but Gus feels fear works best for a guy that we all know has already plotted to kill off not one, but two of his bosses over the past year or two. But there are even more unforeseen consequences, which we all know is something of a hallmark of both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And although Gus Fring's men, Victor and Tyrus, were confident the scene of the desert shootout would be cleaned up with no one the wiser, apparently no one thought to do anything regarding Jimmy's old Suzuki, that's right, got it right this time, esteem, that was pushed into a ravine. the car he would be basing his whole story off of, and the detail that occurs to Lalo later on that day. Well, after he's gone to see Hector for what feels like the last time. It's as Nacho is driving him off to the drop-off spot to presumably be picked up by his cousins, that's when Lalo makes like Columbo. Because there's just one more thing he needs to do after he makes Nacho drive back several miles to find Jimmy's old jalopy, that ugly yellow car with some fresh bullet holes in it. So that night, just as Jimmy's reacting to what he believes is Kim taking a ride down Bad Choice Road, the title, there's a knock at the door, as well as a few incessant and initially ignored calls to Jimmy's flip phone, and it's Mike on the phone trying to warn Jimmy as he tells him to leave the phone on but out of sight. And it's Lalo at the door, who wants to hear that story about Jimmy in the car again, and again, and again. And then we get what may very well be the most tension-filled scene in the history of the series, capped off by Kim showing off once again why she is the MVP of Season 5, and sparing Mike having to show off his sharpshooting skills. Okay, I hope that, was that like 2 minutes? Did anyone time me? Let me see. Probably not, who knows. That's the basic summation of the episode. We got a lawyer with us here, so I don't know if that was good by summation standards, but whatever. But let's get to you guys. Where do we start? I'm thinking we should probably backtrack and do this a little bit on the chronological side. You know, we can just go right to the start. The only other thing I wanted to mention, although I should probably leave it to you guys to mention, it was cool that this episode begins with a big nod to an episode from last season, the episode Something Stupid, which used that song. They do it here as well. Both episodes did that whole split screen with Jimmy and Kim. And I do remember when we did the podcast last year, or 2 years ago, actually, I guess, right? Had to be 2 years ago with that season 4. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, if you can reach back into your memory here. Didn't we feel at the time, when in that episode, we were basically watching the dissolution of Jimmy and Kim's relationship? Because it seemed like they're just moving further apart the further that sequence went on. And then it turned out we were just wrong.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like it at the time.
Yeah, I thought it was like, they kind of misled us because I was thinking, oh, they're clearly on the verge of breaking up, and that they've actually gotten closer over the course of time. Yeah, the other thing they do the split screen thing. It's interesting that this time, instead of sharing, they were doing a split screen before, even though they were sharing the same space the whole time, and now they're doing it, but they are physically far apart. It really culminates in an emotional scene when the split screen evaporates between them, which is kind of sort of the opposite, I believe, of what happened back in that episode in season 4, where there wasn't much emotion at the end of the sequence, if I recall. The other thing I'm going to say...
Not as much urine drinking.
What? Say it again?
Not as much urine drinking in season 4 either.
No, not as much. And she's also smoking in the house. Which always should step outside. That to me, that's only a step below drinking your own pee. I'm just saying.
And we rarely see her smoke without Jimmy too. So I noticed, that seemed a little notable too, because normally they're just doing it together.
That's very true. Absolutely. So let's start with that scene, and we can just walk through Jimmy's shoes all the way up to the next morning when he gets that call from the courthouse. So let us start with who wants to talk first. Jamie, would you like to talk first on this one?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
You can.
So we're tapping in here on the first morning before he gets the call when they decide they're going to have a drama-free day.
You tap it. You can, anything in the first half hour of the episode is yours to go on about as you see fit. Dazzle us with your insights and observations, or as Lalo would say, tell me again.
Okay. I will, the two things that I really want to bring up, I guess, maybe three things that I want to bring up and all of that is, first of all, the amazing shirts that Saul and Mike were wearing at the truck stop. That was pretty fun. That's, shirts that they clearly bought at the truck stop. You see it pretty much every touristy area. Something weird about seeing Mike in a almost fluorescent colored t-shirt.
Whenever I see a gag like that done on a movie or a TV show, it always makes me think of Pulp Fiction.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. With the whole diner
Plus
scene.
And we have had a scene of like, didn't we have Walt and Jesse buying really lame shirts at one point also?
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
there's so much shared hybrid weird shit between the show and Breaking Bad now. It's crazy.
Well, and that is actually going to bring me to the second spot that I wanted to stop in. When she is making the orange juice, and she's putting the orange juice in the juicer, and we're getting all those really close shots of the blender. That was some of the most Breaking Bad camera work that we've seen in a long time on the show. So I thought it was really cool, but also they shot it in such a way that it was like really kind of disturbing. So it was really easy to kind of jump into Jimmy's head, of the stress he was feeling during that moment.
It reminded me of the best police show ever, Dexter.
Yeah.
God.
Opening credits. It's that blood orange.
All right, so
yeah, I thought that was really cool. And then on the rewatch that I did this afternoon, just to kind of make sure that I was catching everything again, it was the same thing. It had the same effect going through, so it was pretty solid.
I'm sorry, I was just in the middle of changing the title of the show to Scott and Brian from Scott and Dan. Anyway, speaking of Brian, what you can wait. Your turn to weigh in here.
I would say the things that stood out to me was I felt like, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but this being called Bad Choice Road, upon rewatch, watching it the second time, I felt like where the resolve came in on that side-by-side shot. I think that means now Kim and Jimmy are on the same road, and their fates are inextricably intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what it meant, because we've seen that shot, like you said, throughout the series, but they've never come together in the way it did. And I think the way we see Kim act, they've kind of fooled us all along, like they're going to break up. And she really seems to care about him deeply and has totally committed to him and forgiven things that in the past she might not have. And she clearly recognizes something's wrong, but she doesn't call him on it. When he gets back, and the thing I liked at the start was when he got to the clerk's office to post the bond. It's very accurate that if you showed up with millions of dollars, that would cause big red flags.
Yeah.
And an immediate investigation. And probably in a real world would cause an investigation of him as a lawyer too, to see if he had engaged in anything. But great scene, and Lalo in that scene. And let me just say this, and Dan and I know have focused over time about the technical excellence. The makeup on the way that Jimmy and Mike looked riding back in the car.
Oh, man.
Like how terrible they looked. Like I thought, did Jonathan Banks really stand out in the sun too long shooting these scenes?
Oh, yeah.
The way they made his head look, and the way even throughout the whole show, Odenkirk showed the signs of it, and the way he looked when he took his shirt off. I mean, I didn't even think about the straps, the strap marks being on his back. And I didn't have a sense that this was 36 hours, which is a remarkable amount of time to be in the desert. But I thought that the first act of him just getting sort of trying to get things together and showing that he was freaked out, and Kim sort of took a very nurturing, protective role over him, was really a great setup for where we went with the rest of the episode. And I also got the sense, and we've talked about this in prior episodes, that there is something now, that something's changed with Mike and Jimmy. And I think when we get to it later in the episode, when Mike's asking him to put the phone down so he can protect him, we see Mike becoming more of that person. He wants to protect Nacho and his dad.
Right.
And he seems to now have got this respect for Jimmy, where he's absolutely working with him to try to make sure he got his story straight.
Right.
In the car and telling him what he needs to do. And when Jimmy tells that story to Kim and later tells it to Lalo, like, I mean, he did better than I thought he would.
Right.
Surprisingly low-key explanation and did pretty good. So, I thought it was a great setup for what happened in the rest of the episode.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll definitely have a bit more to say about the relationship between Mike and Jimmy when we get to that final third, which is going to follow up on what you're saying here, but I'm going to try to compartmentalize it and save it for then. I think, Dan, is there anything else you wanted to say about the first third before I make any observations myself?
Basically just going to agree with Brian as much as it pains me to do so. But Brian, I know you listen to the Insider. I know you listen to the Insider podcast, Brian. So you know how last week how tough of a shoot it was for them out in the desert. So I'm sure the fact that Jonathan Banks and Odenkirk were both out there, getting their ass kicked in the hot sun, that also helped with their performance.
Yeah,
and how they looked. Because they were they're actually, they were out there a lot more than 36 hours, shooting the episode. So that helped. What'd you say, Jamie?
Hey, I have a quiz for you, movie guy. Do you know what they were watching in their drama-free afternoon?
Yeah, I know. You're asking me or Dan?
Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I have the Criterion Collection. I have the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of His Girl Friday.
Yep.
All right. I knew you would. I knew what it was because I'd seen it a bunch of times, and then I was like, oh, I should mention that. And I was like, Dan will know what it is.
It's weird that that's the second time, I don't know if it was this show or something else I've watched in the last few weeks, where someone was watching His Girl Friday on TV in something I was watching. I just don't recall if they did it, if that's the second time they've used it on this show, or there's another TV show I've watched, or movie, might have been a movie actually, where they were watching His Girl Friday. It's just strange that that movie has popped up twice. I guess it's just one of those go-to metaphorical movies, whatever. You guys pretty much covered it pretty well. The only other things that kind of struck me during the first half hour, some beautiful, and again, this is kind of it's almost silly to even mention it with the show because it's a given for every episode. I love the composition of a number of the shots that we saw throughout this episode, but especially in the first half hour. That first shot of Jimmy sitting at the gas station before Mike even comes back out with his beverage and everything. It's such a beautifully composed, stark looking shot. It struck me. It's kind of thing I would definitely just put it in a frame, put it on my walls. I really thought it was that admirable a shot. And going back to when you guys were talking about just the way Kim was, I think it was Brian talking about her being nurturing. It's interesting to watch how this relationship, which there's always been a closeness between them, but there's also been some evolution there. And there is a tendency for Kim to take on that nurturing role, but it's become so much deeper now than it was years ago when it was maybe looking out for an underdog, looking out for your friend, looking out, and now it's looking out for the one you love. The fact that when we see her find the cup, the coffee, whatever you call it, those things, with the bullet hole in it, and she does not call him on it, and which is more emblematic of the fact that she, before she even out and out says it, that she knows that he's not telling her the truth or the full truth, but she's going to let it go because the fact that he's home and safe is more important than him hiding, that he had encountered violence there. That's just such... I don't know if Kim in season 1 would have done that. I don't know if Kim in season 2 would have done that, but Kim in season 5 does that. You know what I mean?
She definitely understands, that he's not lying to her because he's like a scuzzbag liar. He's lying to her because he cares about her and like is trying not to hurt her, which is problematic for relationships in itself. But I think at least she realizes that like he isn't doing it just because he's a scumbag. He's just like trying not to freak her out.
Well,
and I just wanted to add real quick before I forget, Scott. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. But was anyone else shocked to see her in casual clothing? Because we're so used to her like being dressed up and in court and in meetings, and she's always so professional. Like just seeing her in like normal clothes walking around the house for that length of time, like was very interesting to me, because Kim is not a very casual person. She's a pretty serious person. And I thought the amount of time she was in casual clothing was very interesting to me. And I was kind of like, wow, like, she looked like a different person than she does normally. And just the whole dynamic, the change between Let's Get Married and now has come really fast and deep, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, she's as Gilligan uses whenever I've heard him in interviews. It's one of his favorite words. She's just wonderful. She's wonderful. She's fantastic, and we'll be talking a lot more about her as we get more into this episode. Actually, let us. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in that first. Oh,
I've got Speaking of Gilligan, I've got a small anecdote. But anyway, this is a small little tidbit. But Thomas Schnauz is one of Gilligan's friends from like way back, and he also worked on X-Files with him. But coincidentally, Schnauz wrote the episode of X-Files that Aaron Paul was in. So it doesn't have much to do with anything, but just something, since both Aaron Paul and Cranston were on X-Files before. But Schnauz was the writer of that episode.
Oh, that's a great little tidbit. And by the way, Aaron Paul was excellent in this week's Westworld. Anyway. And I do also just want to make a little mention, because I think it's the only. I'm trying to think right now. Is it the only time we see him in the episode? Yeah. Only because it's the only time we see him in the episode, so I just want it to be mentioned a bit more. When Mike goes to see Gus, and the fact that he. Not just finding out who's behind, the guys in the desert, but Mike trying to get Nacho off the hook. And you actually, and I'll admit, for a moment there, I thought he was actually going to pull it off. And then I realized he's not going to pull it off. And when Fring, oh lordy, I think the Invisible Woman has vanished again. And totally made me lose my chain of thought there. I should never read things that pop up when we're doing the podcast.
Damn you, Jamie.
When Gus delivered... Okay, see if you can get her back on the cast while I keep talking, so people aren't...
See what happens? First you got Kim dressing like a slob the whole episode. We can't take her seriously, and now we got Jamie dipping out on the podcast. It's fucking women.
We're not going to get another good review from Dennis Pettit at this rate. Brian, I believe that review was probably all you anyway.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm back. Listen, I'm just going to stop you and interrupt you really quick, because it was really irritating that you couldn't hear me. But you remember how many times I have brought up that girl's ponytail? Yes. I'm just saying, for the first time, we got to see that perfectly maintained ponytail look like a normal person's ponytail. Okay, moving on. Back to where you were at.
And this is why we have some estrogen on the podcast nowadays for insights like that. It was when Gus
I'll make sure to add some pony. I'll add pony audio to that after I add well drops.
This whole scene was like a minute and a half. I haven't been able to talk about it.
Just go. Take it and run.
Fucking people. When Gus gets into his when he gets really cutting about, and he makes that comment about Nacho, about a dog biting when the dog bites his owner, you don't reward him, whatever. And that when he says that, I realize, oh yeah, that's why I said the thing earlier. Gus knows that Nacho already has a reputation of trying to knock off his boss more than once. First Tuco, then Hector. Um, we might not like the idea that Gus is doing this to Nacho because we kind of like Nacho and blah blah blah. But Gus has a pretty good point. I can't really argue. It's a really good fucking point. So there you go. That's all I wanted to say about that.
It was a really good scene too. I mean, I liked how Gus was like a little surprised that Mike was willing to like continue to challenge him on this issue. I thought that, just the look on his face.
Yeah,
I liked it.
I think one of the great things about this episode, and this is a great. I mean, the last three in particular have been just fucking top notch. I mean, some of the best episodes of this series, period. But one of the things that really struck me about this episode, and for the most part, until we get to that final act, it's in a very quiet way. There's a reasonable amount of tension in so many scenes in this episode, where even when people are questioning about the money that Brian brought up before at the bail thing. I mean, that's more of a mild, almost comical form of tension. But then when he sees Lalo outside, all of a sudden that tension goes from maybe a 3 to a 7 on the scale, kind of a thing. The scene with Mike and Gus, there's a considerable amount of tension there between them that often isn't there between those two in previous episodes, at least as far as I can tell. So, I mean, again, hats off to the Schnauz, for what he pulled up.
It really says something about the writing when you have probably the majority of your fan base has already, for the most part, seen Jimmy in the future alive and well. I mean, obviously there's some shit that's gone down in between here and there, but he's okay.
Right.
And you get these moments with him and Lalo, and that he's going to be okay mostly, but there's so much tension there that you find yourself getting like really nervous for him.
Right.
And that's phenomenal writing because you already know he's okay.
Right. Absolutely. It's the mark of a well-done prequel.
Yeah.
So, now let's delve into what I would call the middle chunk of this episode, that's the stuff which we like Jimmy failing in court. There's a couple funny parts there, actually. It's not a very funny episode, but at least there are a few moments of like very mild levity there. Kim, of course, giving up the law firm, Lalo seeing Hector, and Jimmy, and this might be an interesting scene to talk about, actually. Jimmy really not being happy that Mike's the only guy he can talk to about all this. And then finally Lalo doing his desert detective work, which that basically constitutes the next 30 minutes of the episode. And then the final act is, the apartment. Let's put it that way. So,
ooh, that's my favorite.
I know it's I actually thought about that 10 seconds before I said it, and I deliberately said it that way. See, it's awesome.
We got to talk about the scene too, where Jimmy's a lousy lawyer, or Saul is a crappy lawyer, and finally, and Oatley gets the better of him and has a good time.
Yeah, the whole Jimmy. That would be the Jimmy failing in court part I mentioned. Yeah, I want to hear, especially because it gave that guy some opportunities. We haven't gotten to see him we've never seen him truly get the better of him, so it's kind of fun. So who did we go to first in the first set? Jamie, did we go to you first before?
Yeah, pass it on.
So we're going to go to Brian now.
Take the wheel, Brian.
Jesus.
Take the wheel.
Okay.
I will take the wheel and drive it right into a ditch where it can be discovered later.
I think she said break the wheel, and then she said break the wheel, and then she told you that you had the best story, so you're the king of this podcast now, or whatever.
Oh, no.
Well, I intentionally
I hate
away
you.
from that because of you, Matt Dan. So
I hate that he did that.
But
hey, this is a TV show where there's like a guy with a ferret face hassling a defense attorney, so I think it's appropriate for me to be doing this right now.
Well, I will say that the joy of that prosecutor chasing Jimmy is funny, but Jimmy also, you see, like, he's so off his game. But I did think I did think that there was something very um, touching about the fact that he wanted to get up and go be there for his client. Um, and I think it was probably the discomfort of being at home and just not wanting to sit still in his own thoughts. But going to court and standing up with his client, um, there was something I thought was pretty cool about that. Uh, and it was a little bit painful to see that guy continue to chase him and hound him, which is the total flip of him chasing the prosecutors into the bathroom
Yep.
to hound them, or into the elevator to hound them for plea deals. They were just hounding him to gloat that that it didn't turn out well for him. So it was interesting to see that flip of what we've usually seen in his legal career. The thing that I'm sorry, Scott, you're going to say something?
The only thing I was going to say, I thought it was from a writing standpoint, it was a very interesting choice for them not to show us anything that happened in the courtroom. That we just find out about everything after, because I can see two very different schools of thought on that. Obviously, when you're dealing with a TV show, even though this was actually a much longer episode than normal, you're usually dealing with a constricted amount of time, so you can't go beyond a certain thing. But I mean, I like that decision. I found it. I just found it was odd when I realized what they had done. I was like, oh, that's interesting. They're not going to show it, and I realized they don't have to show it. They don't have to show it.
I think the reason they didn't show it, and the reason we think it's the right choice, is because it wasn't a client. It wasn't a major client that Jimmy would have put on a pedestal, like a Lalo or someone. It was a nameless, faceless client that he still went to stand in for, and which is more, probably at that point, it's much more hurtful for him to lose that case,
right?
Because he wanted to tank Lalo's case, but just couldn't let himself,
right?
So I think that adds to the drama of it and the pain that someone probably fairly ordinary and normal, he just went in and blew it and let him down.
Right. And switching from a writer's perspective to a producer's perspective, it's also the far more economical choice. Right. Because you don't got to deal with, additional actors, additional set, additional time. That probably would have cost them another day of shooting for something that doesn't add anything beyond that we don't get from the interaction between the prosecutor and Jimmy afterwards. So I thought it was a really smart decision. I just found it interesting that they went that way initially. I'm like, oh, I see why they did that. That makes sense. Okay.
Right. The other part that I'd like to talk about, and I'll leave the rest to everyone else, is the desert. Well, Lalo taking the last second to say, hey, turn around, let's go back. At first, when you see that scene, the way they chose to cut it, where he drops his bags and Lalo says, you want me to hang around? He goes, no, leave. Like, for just a second, I know that wall wasn't there, but it was very reminiscent of the people getting, meeting the disappearer. Like, just standing there. And for a second, I thought, how's this going to play out? But then he turns around and goes back. And let me say, the jump down to that car, that was a pretty impressive stunt, whoever did that.
I have it written down as his supervillain leap to the car.
Yeah, and the way that Lalo goes into this and thinks about it, especially after he saw Hector at the nursing home or the rehab center, whatever, and it's almost like he saw him and he was a joke. Like that he was sitting there with a party hat on looking foolish, and he took sort of pity on him, or it upset him to see him look foolish. It almost seemed like to me that sat with him, to like him say, I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure I'm not being made a fool out of here. And that's what encouraged him to go back just to check, because he was going to be there anyway on that car. And then when he finds it, when he finds the car and sees it, I was surprised. I thought after last week there would have been more bullet holes, and you kind of had to get down and look for that bullet hole. But he scrambles down in that wash and out and jumps and the way they portrayed Lalo, I mean, he's both a mental and a physical force to be reckoned with, and you almost see, like Jamie said, like he's a supervillain here, and I thought that was a great scene. I also like the way that Nacho has played this in that, and you see him hanging back, but you also see the resignation that he's like, well, I was this close to getting out, now I'm not, because Mike had said, wait till he's south of the border, and we'll see what we can do. And I'm not sure Mike might not still have tried to help him, based on what we've seen, but he knows if he's still there, they can't move, they can't do what they want to do. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes with the trip way south of the border. Where do y'all think they're going?
I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out.
When I was watching that scene, my first thought was, before they were doing the car thing, like, I thought he was having kind of like a Gus Fring in season 4, episode 12 of Breaking Bad, like Sixth Sense, like somebody was trying to whack him, because it kind of made it seem like maybe that was possible, because they showed Fring's guys with their like GPS device thing, like tracking Nacho's car and stuff. So I thought maybe like he briefly had like a sense of like, well, like maybe like somebody's gonna try to take him out there. But then, that of course went away quickly when he wanted to go back to check out Saul's car.
Right.
But anyway, that was my thought for a few seconds. And also, when Brian said there isn't a wall there, if anybody's wondering why I laughed out loud, because like they're down at the border and there still isn't a fucking wall there. So guess what? Oh well.
That looks like a well.
Oh boy.
Antelope Wells, New Mexico, it's the location.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When he was visiting Hector, were the rest of you, like when he was walking out and you could see her wheeling him over to the birthday party, were the rest of you going, please put on a hat, please put on the hat, please put on the hat?
I knew they were going to put the hat on him. I knew that was going to happen.
All right.
I mean, it's funny when you mentioned Nacho's sad resignation. I also felt there was a bit of a sad resignation with Lalo when he was leaving Hector there. Just even before he leaves, just when the nurse comes over to take Hector over, because he likes cake and whatever, and Lalo kind of brushes her off for a minute, just give us a minute, whatever. But just that moment, I think it's the realization that Hector's never going to be, in his mind, Hector's never going to be more than what he is right now. And
right.
To say he's a shell of what he was is putting it mildly. And I think, basically, I think, Brian, I think what you said is pretty much the way I would look at that scene as well. And also the idea of him being a joke. And one thing is, like, he doesn't like the idea of someone getting the better of him or someone trying to screw with him. It's in fact, that probably nobody does, quite frankly, so it's not really that rare a trait. But it's definitely the Salamancas don't like that. Either you're right. Tuco or Hector or Lalo. And it's interesting how, or the cousins, I guess, are also Salamancas. And I love it. We see all these members of this family and how they're all lethal, and yet personality-wise, they're all very different. And they're all scary in different ways. Go on.
Did you catch Lalo telling him, like, don't worry, when Tuco does this, like, we'll make sure he stays clean?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, what a brilliant touch. Like, and we all know where Tuco goes, that it's not that at all, but sort of saying, if I'm not going to be here, I've got a plan so that Tuco won't act crazy, because he's the loose cannon one. And to see that level of detail and I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant, because Lalo, clearly, the way they've made this show, at least to me, Lalo is the most impressive of the Salamancas we've seen.
Right.
Yeah, he's scary.
Well, it's interesting to see. We obviously, there's no way of knowing if between now and the end of the series, and we've got one episode left now, and I believe they're going to have more episodes in the final season because I think we're suspecting they're going to split it in half because that's the AMC way, whatever. So whether that means there's going to be another, I forget the number now, there's 12, 13, whatever number of episodes are left of this series overall. I don't know if we're going to see Hector again or not. I would assume we would, but not necessarily. But it was funny with that conversation about Tuco to start trying to draw a line to how we get from Hector in that nursing home or rehab. I mean, I look at it as a nursing home more than a rehab facility, but it's probably it's either way, whatever. It's probably both. Who knows? How we get from there to that weird little house shack, whatever, where Hector is apparently living with Tuco or Tuco's visit. I haven't watched that episode in a long time, but how we get from there to there, you know, and we either Hector being there has anything to do with what Lalo said about having someone to try to keep Tuco in line, so to speak, because he certainly doesn't seem that way. And when we meet him in Breaking Bad, because isn't he like killing his right hand man here, there, and everywhere, and all the other shit he does there? So
I'm still curious as to like if we're gonna see something which I think should be significant, but the fact that Lalo has met Mike, but Tuco and the cousins have also met Mike in a way. So at some point, if Lalo figures out there's some kind of connection there, like Mike put Tuco in jail, and then they sent the cousins to like threaten his daughter or granddaughter. I think that's the potential for some cool story stuff. Also, I heard dude meow in the background. So
yeah, I know.
We like to have our podcast.
And hearing him, I scratched at a hive on my hand so bad I'm openly bleeding right now. It's great.
Richie just meowed too, so good boy.
Damn cat. So, there's a bunch of other things we kind of haven't gotten to in that section. Did either of you want to weigh in on the other stuff before I bring it up myself? Or should I bring it up just to remind you guys? I'll bring it up just to remind you guys. There she goes.
I would just like to touch a little bit on when he is not just making fun of him in his hat, but when he's talking to Hector too. We've heard it a few times from the Salamancas, just the importance of family, and it makes their battle like the same, but still really different from the others that we're seeing. We've got one side that's about revenge, we've got one side that's about the money, and then we've got these guys that are about loyalty, the money, and revenge kind of all together. I think that much like the mob, one of the scariest things about it is because it is all family. And I think that takes Lalo to a different level than his competitors, and is part of what makes him that much scarier, but also puts Nacho in that same league. Obviously, he's not at the same he's not as at the same height, but it's the family. I will do whatever it takes for family. Something that we see Walter White in the future use constantly as his backbone, and is part of what gives him the idea that everything he's doing is righteous.
Oh yeah, it's the eternal excuse for doing the wrong thing. Yeah.
And Walter White, just like the Salamancas, is like all about that pride too. So I'm not sure how pride and like family. I guess maybe pride in their family is the connection here. But yeah,
it's almost a shame because of obviously over the course of these 4.5 or almost 5 full seasons of Better Call Saul, we've from starting it off with Tuco, and then Hector coming back, and then Gus Fring, so and then the cousins. We're seeing all these, to use the phrase, villains, super villains that we all know from Breaking Bad to begin with. At this point, it's almost a shame that Lalo wasn't a character on Breaking Bad, because that would have been a really fascinating dynamic to see how Walter White would have dealt with someone like him because he's so different than all the other threats that he dealt with in one form or another.
Yes.
It just would have been curious to see how that would have played.
I agree, and if I ranked supervillains of this universe, I would say Lalo is number one or about number one of all the ones we've seen so far.
Yeah, I would go along with that.
Yeah. He's my number 2, but Doctor Doom is still number 1, probably.
Oh, then he's my number 3 because Galactus and Doctor Doom.
So you're talking about the movie Galactus, right?
Oh, the big cloud. That's you. No,
That was very well executed. Good job.
No, he's talking about Battlestar Galactus, man. What do you think?
Oh my god. Well, anyway, other than Lalo and Jimmy, the other kind of major thing that happened in that middle third, well, there's two major things, but Kim giving up the law firm's kind of big, kind of a big deal. And did you guys see that coming? Because I have to admit, I kind of did. I kind of felt like this was something that's been building up the entire season, and I'm gratified that she didn't do it in a burn your bridges kind of way, but it's kind of intriguing that they also did it in a very quick, over and easy. Like we didn't get like the big I'm quitting kind of scene with her. It's almost it's kind of like we didn't see. It's kind of like not seeing the courtroom stuff with Jimmy. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Dan. I just wanted to get that thought out.
No, I agree with you totally. Like we didn't see the courtroom stuff with Jimmy, but we also we saw her talking to Rich about it, and we saw him react, but we didn't hear it. And I think that's interesting, and I like that because then you got the ability to like kind of fill in the blanks yourself. And I like when a show or a movie treats a viewer as an intelligent person that can make up their own mind about how stuff goes. So I thought it was nice. Show don't tell. Good
right.
job, guys.
I also like it in both instances because it's their way of avoiding beats that we've already seen before, be it on this show or just in general. Like we've seen that kind of scene before enough times, so we didn't need to see it. Instead, we're informed about it by the way she speaks to her secretary or executive assistant, whatever you call people in that capacity. The fact that she goes back and gets the bottle top from the tequila, which is it's a callback all the way to when she ran that first little mini scam with Jimmy, a few seasons back, which is kind of a nice little nod to, in a weird way, it's almost like she's saying, we know that she says she's doing this because she wants to focus on her pro bono work, and basically we're trying to help people who actually need help is what it really comes down to. But her going back and getting that bottle cap also made me think she's kind of doing this for him, and that's the one thing she goes back to get on her own. That doesn't need to be boxed up and sent to her eventually. Whatever. She doesn't even go and take that little framed letter thing that she has on behind her, which seems to be one of the things that kind of puts the thought, confirms the thought in her head to quit in the first place. She just goes back to that bottle top. I thought that was significant.
Yeah, her grabbing the top of the tequila bottle kind of feels like like a form of commitment in a way, where she's just like, okay, I'm all in on this shit now, but not in like but it doesn't feel like she doesn't feel defeated or resignation, and it just kind of feels like she's like taking agency and just like, okay, I gave this some thought. This is how it is. This is what I'm going to do. I like how it was done from a position of strength rather than weakness, and in good service to the character who deserves it.
I think that what that represented to me was not quite her just doing it for Jimmy. What it seemed like to me more was him like thinking he was dead made her assess what was important to her. And she didn't care about that law firm job when she got back, now that he was back and alive, that she took a risk she probably wouldn't normally take because she assessed things, because she was really in a place where she thought she might have to be without him. And I think it just put her priorities in place. And she said, I'm done with this. I want to do what I want to do and live the way I want to live.
Well,
Jimmy's a part of that.
Yeah, but you could see the bottle cap kind of representing all that at once. You could see it representing her wanting to take control of her own life. You could see it representing doing something that actually makes her happy, or as opposed to something she's just doing out of, because it's the right thing to do, because it's how lawyers make their money. Oh, look, we've lost the invisible woman again.
I'm here. I took matters into my own hands.
You're the Kim of the podcast, but yet not the MVP yet. I kid.
Can I add something to the idea of Kim going into her office and sitting down and looking at that picture she had and kind of remembering who she is and what she wants out of all of the things, everything she's done to get to have the job that she has, to have the skill level that she has. She's not doing what she wants to be doing. And I think it's a mirror of earlier when Saul decided to get up, or Jimmy decided to get up and go to court for this nobody. It's this moment where they're going, I'm in dangerous ground of completely losing myself. This is the one place where I know who I am.
Yeah, I go along. I think it's one of those things where I think you can attach so many different types of meaning and metaphorically to the bottle cap, and I think they're all accurate. I think what you guys have said is probably more dead on than anything else. I mean, you could even go to the fact that what she's doing, quote unquote, what she's been doing is safe. She's back, she's with a firm. It's banking law, whatever. She knows she can do whatever, But it's not giving her that shot, that adrenaline. She's not feeling alive. And what Jimmy, essentially coming back from the dead for her, it's kind of like that jolt. Like, okay, it does make you reassess your priorities, and you want to do what really makes you feel alive. And hey, when you take that little bottle cap. That was when she was going through that really weird time with her and Jimmy, and then she ended up getting involved, doing a little con with him, and she kind of felt like things clicked for her for a little bit. It almost it represents, take a chance, risk, what. So it can kind of represent that as well. It's one of those things where it can become like a totem for a whole bunch of things. So, but I think it's all of them all at once. Just a brilliant idea that someone they thought, oh, she should go back to get that. I really like that. That was like the touch. I was like, oh, that's really nice. I really like that. Yeah. And some film school ladies probably go, when Jimmy gets the weird little needle in his foot in the previous episode, one can say that's like the prickly things on the bottle top. Like, no, shut the fuck up.
No, but the lid on the tequila bottle is a lot like Jimmy going back for his coffee mug with a bullet hole in it.
Yes.
Right. That's perfect. And I think what we were talking about earlier about the fact that we don't hear what she says to Rich leaves all what we're talking about open to interpretation and makes for better storytelling.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, I hate to say this. I forgot. I don't think I mentioned it in the previous podcast. Speaking of things being metaphors or representing other things, did anyone have the horrible thought in the previous episode when I think it's the previous episode when he goes to get when he discovers the bullet hole in the coffee thing? Did anyone have that weird horrible thought for a moment that represents Kim?
Oh yeah,
and worry that's like, oh, that's a harsh little bit of foreshadowing. I'm just because I had that thought.
Yeah, even in this episode. When she picks it up, she looks through the hole, and it's like the bullet hole's right at her head.
Right. Dan, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say no. I was just more focused on the fact that, oh, good, the coffee would have dehydrated in the desert anyway. So good, shoot the fuck out of it, Tom.
Wow.
Safety first.
I also, as much as I want to get to that final, the fun stuff. Gotta talk about the Jimmy Mike scene, though. The Jimmy Mike scene's this kind of goes back to Brian, what you were talking about as far as Mike's feelings about Jimmy, which I think we also will be talking about in the final thing as well. But Mike, again, taking the time to talk at length to Jimmy about what he's going through and understanding why he's in the state that he's in and trying to talk him through it a bit, even if it's not really working. Although he does tell him a story that we know that Jimmy's going to mangle at some point later on. And if I have a second drink before this podcast is over, I might just improvise a song, because "Bad Choice Road" just sounds like a great country western song. So I just wanted to like try to come up with lyrics on off the top of my head, because "road" that rhymes with a bunch of things. Like,
you should come up with a version of that and sing it on the podcast. I'd like to hear that.
Okay,
now.
Let me wait till after. Let me get a little bit, dude. Let me get at least a few fingers more of whiskey in me, and we'll see what happens. As opposed to a few fingers.
Are you talking to me or the cat? I need to be clear here.
I'm not sticking a few fingers up my cat's ass. I'm not doing that.
He's probably more intelligent than me right now.
We were doing so good, guys. We were doing so good.
I know. We were this close to getting another congratulations on a great podcast comment. So close, so close.
Okay, Scott. Okay, just ruminate on this, Scott. You don't have to use it, but just woodshedding here. First words: almost heaven, Albuquerque. Take me home, Bad Choice Road.
Oh, you're going straight you're going straight parody. Oh, I wasn't going to do parody. I was going to do entirely original work.
See if you can get that rough pizza in the song too. I'd appreciate that.
Anyway, so that I just thought, going along with what you were saying earlier, Brian, that the scene with Mike and Jimmy having that conversation, and even though Jimmy is exasperated at the fact that Mike at this point, although not true by the time the episode's over, but at this point Mike's the only person he can talk to about all this, and he hates that. But I think as much as Mike is able to be, that Mike is very empathetic or sympathetic, and I always forget which is the right word to use here, so whatever, to Jimmy here. And I thought that was, I think it's really significant. And it really feeds into what we see happen in the final act as well. So I was very... I wasn't moved by it, but I thought it was just a very... Whenever you give Mike an opportunity, or Jonathan Banks an opportunity to be, as far as the actor, to really go on any kind of storytelling, anecdotal, whatever you want to call it, he always kills with it. Whether it's from Half Measures to now, whenever you give him that opportunity, it's going to be good. And once again, knocks it out.
The way he told the story was almost like that once you do something, you've gone far enough, like it's all out of your hands, that it's almost like predestination or what's going to happen is predetermined, which I think is part of probably what he tells himself when he finally said, "I'm just going to play the cards I'm dealt," in the previous episode, and sort of resigned himself. But I thought what was really cool about it was, it's almost like Mike was having to teach Jimmy how to live with doing bad stuff. Because Jimmy, for all his bluster and all the silly things he's done, has never really done anything that bad like Mike has. And Mike was sort of initiating him in how you live with doing that stuff.
Yeah, because most of what Jimmy has done in the past has been legal sin, not crossing into mortal sin territory.
Yeah,
it's a pretty heavy weight for somebody who usually walks around and just either lets shit roll off his back or finds a way to juggle it. And this isn't something that he can do with this.
Yeah, he's always been good at rationalizing stuff like that. And Jamie, don't swear on the podcast, please. But yeah, I get what
Yeah, real PG in this place. Let me tell you what.
That's my favorite joke of the podcast so far, I have to say. It's even funnier because when we were talking about Nacho earlier, I was gonna throw in a comment like, I feel like Nacho should wear a shirt that just says "fuck" all the time. Because that's basically every time things are looking like nope, fuck.
They could buy it at that truck stop. I bet they have one.
It probably does,
or a shirt that said "same shit, different boss."
Oh man, dear Vince Gilligan. All right, I feel now we can move on to the last act, which we all know was a whopper. You know, we kick basically it kicks off with Kim breaking her news to Jimmy and his reaction, and then Lalo comes a knocking, which leads to the tour de force which was pretty much one of the wow scenes of the season, if not the entire show overall. But definitely, and once again, we get one of those. If Ray Seahorn is going to submit a tape to the like, okay, you know what? Just submit the entire damn season because if you don't get nominated or win, you know, because there's no more crappy Game of Thrones to freaking fill up everything. It's a travesty. Even though everyone will be doing it remotely from home apparently, but who knows? Anyway,
it'll just be like an empty. It'll be like an empty theater with like Brian there clapping for Game of Thrones.
I did not support Game of Thrones final season to win all the awards, Dan. I said there was one good episode.
But I'm sure you look good in a suit, so you know, you go ahead and wear a tuxedo. It's fine.
I have like the bowler tie kind of thing going.
He's not wearing a suit. He's wearing the T-shirt that says "Same shit, different boss."
Different, same shit, different podcast.
Exactly. That's it.
Or a different podcast host. Oh no. Anyway, so
on the back of that shirt it says Ozark season 2 was just okay.
just hashtag not top tier. Hashtag not peak TV. So anyway, about that final act. Jamie, I'm going to make you talk.
Oh, damn it. Okay. All right. So here's what I have in my notes. My important thoughts towards final act. One, when he gets the phone call from Mike, and you see the realization when he finally, because he's kind of like, what the hell? And then when he finally looks up and he sees Kim back away from the door, I think that was like the most like panic-driven moment. And I don't know how they did it because maybe it's because Kim's always just pretty cool for the most part. But there was no special effect, you know, there was no tight zoom. There was nothing that would normally indicate like, oh shit, but it worked. When she backed away from that door. Another thing that I took a note on here is just Lalo when he's hitting that fish tank. And we've got the goldfish in the fish tank. But really, we all know it's Jimmy in this fish tank. And then also, the idea that Mike's right out the window with his rifle, and he's got this target coming down on him the entire time. And what I loved so much is he had him in the scope every second until Kim stood up. And as soon as Kim stood up and she decided to lay down the law, she stood in the way. She was in the way of the target. And to me, that more than anything else was like, that's it right there. She is stepping into the game. And I mean, there's been little things toyed at that whole, sentiment throughout the episode, but that was it right there. That's where she actually stepped into the game, and she got in the way. But much like a badger, would protecting its den, it was needed, and she did the job well. And it was just really great getting to see an actor, well, both actors, whose character and actors themselves require so much control. Just throw it down with this. I mean, you can tell she's angry. You can tell she's at the end. You can tell she's protecting what she loves. But it's so controlled, just like she always is. It's so controlled. But it's great because the reflection coming back to her is so controlled. It was a really intense scene, and I don't know. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was really good. Like I mean, just the entire thing. I mean, their fight was tense enough, but then you got these like phone calls that Jimmy's dismissing, like multiple times, like ratcheting up the tension, and just like, I mean, just all of it was just great. I mean, just the way they set everything up. I mean, Lalo fucking with the fish tank with the phone like 6 inches away multiple times, and just all that stuff. I mean, just like an unbelievably well crafted scene for sure. I mean, I'm sure I was a little worried for Jimmy himself, even though knowing he was going to survive. But my God, what a horribly tense scene. Oh, it's so good.
I love that he keeps repeating, and she's like, "Are you kidding?" I don't know how many times in my life I've had to sit calmly and listen to something be repeated over and over again, and I'm just like, I feel this rage boiling up, and she hops up and she handles it so cool.
Oh yeah, and she was clearly nervous.
I thought when she backed away from the door that he literally had a gun pulled on her until
I did too.
Like, yeah, I mean, it was that convincing that he was that menacing when he walked in, and she was that freaked out. And probably the most amazing thing about the scene to me was, as incredible as Lalo and Kim were, like, it's the first time you see basically Jimmy rendered speechless. And Kim saw he was about to break. And like, if he breaks, it all goes down, and she just stepped up and kicked ass. And the first thing I'll say, and what really started it off, and I thought it was great editing, is that when Jimmy picks up the phone, you can hear Mike is racing in the car, like Mike is speeding. He is going fast, and you hear the concern in his voice.
Right.
It's not calm, cool Mike, like, hey, you're going to do this. He's like, you're going to put the phone down. You're going to do, like, an urgency that Mike doesn't usually have. And he's racing to get there. And you have to assume, it's never said, you have to assume that Gus probably doesn't know Mike's going there to do this. Like, this is Mike freelancing. And
yeah, this is he got do you think he got a heads up from Nacho then, and this is a rescue?
Another theme we didn't see play out, which also works really well for the tension levels. Nacho must have called Mike and let him know, whoa, we came back to Albuquerque. The situation is going to shit right now. So, yes. But yeah, it's just so good. Mike driving his car really fucking fast there. Well, I apologize for the language there.
The one
it just picks up the tension.
Right.
Tension just starts and runs, and Kim looks scared, and then when they're talking, and the way the light is on their faces when they're talking, and the way Lalo just keeps saying again. I mean, it was so menacing. This is the most menacing thing we've seen in this show. And when Kim stood up, I mean, at a moment, I literally thought, because this is, we're getting close to the end of the season, I literally thought, this could be really bad, and we could see something.
It was definitely putting her ass on the line. But can we just say, the moment she looked at, the moment she looked at him and said that he had no one else he could trust, and he needed to get his house in order. I was like, Oh, she just fucking won. Like that's the lawyer right there. She found the weakness by listening to him, realizing the situation, what he had Jimmy set up to do. She recognized how she was going to win this case.
Last week he had the upper hand over her. She just like freaking like just because she's so fucking smart, like she just reversed it and like bam.
She totally did, and the thing I thought in that scene, and I'm not trying to promote my theory, I promise, but when I saw that, I had this terrible fear that right then, when she backed him down, that she's the person he's gonna want to be
right
on his side, and I thought if he could do that to her, he's the kind of person that recognizes game. If somebody has game, what she did, and for him to not do anything and just walk out, I don't think necessarily she's going to be killed. I think he's going to co-opt her, and that's going to go bad based on, I think she did so well. She saved Jimmy. And guess what? That's her bad choice road, right? She stepped up.
And like Mike, was talking about who's in the game.
Right.
There's a moment where Lalo says she's part of the legal team.
Right.
So he's already turning those wheels.
Right. Just a few things, and then I'll flip back to you guys to hear more of what you got to say. A couple things. Number one, because I keep trying to interject. What I wanted to say, what I was waiting till now to say from the first two acts is, obviously Mike has not told Gus what he's doing because Gus wouldn't want him to do that. Period. The fact that Mike is going to do this is what is the thing that shows how he's changed about Jimmy, because if he was to take out Lalo there, which he is clearly primed to do, the moment it looks like Lalo is going to lift a finger against Jimmy in that room, Mike will have screwed himself over with Gus, because that this is certainly something Gus does not want to happen at this point in time. This would be going against what their plans are. It would just
wants everything to be impeachable.
Right. So the fact that the fact that Mike, was going to do this, that more than anything so far, is what shows how things have thawed or changed to whatever degree between Mike and Jimmy, and therefore gives a better, credible foundation for their relationship moving forward, and how it appeared, at least initially when we met them on Breaking Bad, that he was, Saul's right-hand man kind of a situation. So that was the one of the first thoughts I had with that. The second thing, when you guys were talking about the way Kim stands up to Lalo, and I love the fact that you also Dan mentioned, last week, this was the first time she'd ever encountered Lalo before. She literally knew nothing about him. She didn't know anything about the guy other than he was some cartel guy or whatever, but had really no real information to go in on. But now she's encountered him before, and now she just spent all this time in watching what he does. She's gotten a more of a feel for him, and she went about things the same way she went about things with Kevin from Mesa Verde a few weeks earlier. And it's going into lawyer mode, but it's also, she's able to deal with and take down these very strong, domineering, men, but gender's not important here. It's the people who are normally in control, the people who usually command the room. And she's able to take them down. She goes about it as a lawyer, but she's forceful about it, and points out things that it's hard to ignore. Whether it be with Kevin saying, that I told you over and over and you didn't follow my advice, or here saying, when she says, if you couldn't have you can trust one of your own guys to get your money for you, then you've got bigger issues. And if Saul Goodman's the one you're trusting here, that was the pinpoint perfect. And I love the fact that she was literally getting in the way of Mike lining up the shot. So again, they were being very literal with the visual cues and what it means story wise. But it was so perfect for the scene. It worked brilliantly. The only other thing I want to say that I'm gonna let you guys go at it a bit more. I also love the fact that this whole scene just begins as a Jimmy and Kim being, still being, nurturing and caring, and that's starting to escalate into an actual argument, an actual heated argument.
That's so real.
But
how it goes.
But the scene could if the scene had just played throughout with that, we'd still be talking about this major scene between Jimmy and Kim, and how it goes from, for lack of a more dignified way to put it, it goes from a domestic squabble to this is just a credit to the writers, the director, Schnoz and Schnoz, or Schnoz and Schnoz. And when we talk about this being the most tensionful, well, the reason for that is, it's not really, and why I probably don't like the whole comparing this to Breaking Bad thing, and people going, oh, it's a better show. Shut the fuck up, people. Is because, generally speaking, Jimmy or Saul, whatever you want to call him, he himself has not been in life or death situations.
Right.
You had the very beginning of the series with him and Tuco in the desert, which we knew he wasn't. That was, it's like 2 episodes in. But beyond that, he generally hasn't been part of that world. So we feel more tension, we're more freaking out because we haven't seen his life being at risk, Kim's life being at risk. Now that's happening. Now the storylines are merging, and we're suddenly, and it's funny how people are commenting about, last week and this week, oh, it's feeling very Breaking Bad. It's like, yeah, because now we're dealing with life or death stakes, which was what Breaking Bad did every single season. They haven't really done that with most of the characters on this show, at least not, Bob Odenkirk's character, who is still the focus of the show. So that's why I think it just feels like, oh, it's a different show now. So that's my take. Okay, I'll shut up now. No.
I think with the one of the things with the argument between the two of them, just to touch on that, I really felt like overwhelmingly the reason why he was disappointed or upset or whatever about her quitting this posh position she was in is he just didn't want to feel guilt. Somehow he felt like this was his doing. He wasn't seeing it for what it really was. And he felt guilty. And I think that's all that it really was.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's totally guilt.
Well, and I think, too, that when Kim has always been dependable to him, and when suddenly she makes a big move and he's made a big move, he was already anxious, but because he was still suffering in the after effects of the trauma of what he went through, he just didn't want there to be more change. And now all of a sudden everything's in transit, and she wasn't being what she always is, which in a weird way is good emotionally, but the way they've always worked is he was the flighty one, she was the buttoned up steady one, and he could sort of pull her his way, but she would balance him back. By her abandoning that, there's some security I think he had in what she was.
Yeah, she was the control in his chaos.
Yes, that he was reeling, and her making that change while he was reeling, I think was upsetting to his sense of balance.
Well, it's unfortunate that because he, as much as he cares about her, and that's clear, he sometimes and it's a character trait of his. It's just the way he is. He doesn't quite see what's going on with her. He doesn't quite get it. And his read on what she did was she's just pulled a Jimmy. She's just made this big, huge, rash, impulsive decision. That's what I do. That's not what she does. She's supposed to be, the center, the rock, whatever. Not realizing, dude, she's been drifting in this direction for quite some time now. If you didn't pick up on this fact when she enlisted you as part of that whole scheme just a few weeks ago, then you are not in as much tune with this woman as you think you are. And good Lord, you just married her. You should know better. So, yeah, I definitely think she had a very good point when she kind of throws it back at him. Although when she spits out the line about what she does, whatever, it's none of his business. That was kind of the kick to the stomach kind of thing, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought the two of them loved each other. Maybe we are wrong about this after all. It was a very harsh thing for her to say, I thought.
Yeah, but that's what's so great about this show.
I don't think it was any harsher than him, ganging up with a drug cartel and keeping her out of the loop for a really long time and then getting lost in the desert and making her think that her husband was dead for 2 days.
Right.
Right.
That's
I think she was, just trying to hurt him back.
Balancing the scales.
Yes.
Yeah, except he told her he was going to get the money. He didn't know what was going to happen. And he had no way of doing anything about it once it did happen. So what he did was not a deliberate act to hurt her, or so I don't see. I wouldn't. If people
not specifically that moment, but everything that led up to it, the road he chose to go down. There's that road.
Oh, what is
that? And she knows it. She knows the road.
Yeah.
But she honored his choice and she supported it. Even though he didn't fully tell her the truth and she knew it, and she didn't know the truth, at least out of his mouth at that point. She knew what it to be. But then for him to question her choice when she'd supported him, that's why she was so pissed. I mean, in my opinion, hey, you didn't, I've changed our relationship. I didn't even make you tell me everything. And I've supported you, even though you're doing something I may not agree with. I want to do this thing for me, and you're giving me shit about it, and you haven't even been fully honest about what you're doing. That's how I saw it, and I thought, from a writing perspective, I thought that this was a very real fight between two people.
Oh, absolutely,
very real.
And I don't mean to say what she said wasn't called for. It's because Jimmy keeps pushing her that she says that. It's not like she said it right up. So let me make it clear. I'm not saying she was just came out and said something needlessly harsh right off the bat. Jimmy prodding her over and over and basically questioning her rationalization for what she did. He has a point initially because this is her what she did has long-term effects, and to have not mentioned it to him does seem a little strange in the moment. And I get that. Well, after what he just did, I don't equate the two because
they're just both going batshit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, let's say the person that you decide to marry, even if it's for legal purposes, the person you live with, the person you've known for the majority of your adult life, all of a sudden, even though you know that they're, tempted to dip into some dumb shenanigans sometimes, joins up with the actual fucking drug cartel, it's going to stress you out just a little bit. Just a bit.
A little bit. I was worried he was going to do something to the fish, by the way, but anyway.
Yeah, right? I kind of was waiting for him to grab that fish, but he kept tapping it. Jerk. That jerk that he is just kept tapping it. I like how Jimmy's like, oh, that's actually not good for the dish.
I love that he was trying to get it out, trying to stop.
Who fucking says that shit to this guy?
I also love that each time that Jimmy tells the story, he does change the way he tells the story. So I did like that he didn't just repeat the same thing over and over. He changes it, not changing it in the terms like one version is he just embellishes more detail on it. Whether it be the drinking the urine or these heavy bags or all that other stuff. I really liked the way they did that. To me, it also showed the way his mind works because he's definitely got a very great creative mind as well. I mean, we've seen that time and time again with him.
I really appreciate Lalo's brain to, okay, tell me again. Okay, tell me again. Because anybody who's really tried to get to the bottom of somebody's story, tell me again. It was terrifying, but he is such a fun character to watch because he's so smart. Well, but it's mellow. It's this mellow, controlled thing.
Well, this is also, I mean, anyone who's watched enough, cop shows and whatever else over the years, this is just a classic interrogation technique where you make a suspect, tell the story over and over again because you're looking for them to slip up, to change in the story. Oh, that's different. Well, that's something different. So it's similar that obviously he's doing it for other reasons. He's trying to get him to crack because he wants to find out what happened. Although I always wonder what it is that Lalo thinks could have happened because he still ended up bailing him out. So it's a fascinating situation, and I'm trying to see what Lalo's end game is on it. So it's fascinating. Go on.
Yeah. I got the impression that Lalo also was maybe looking to see if he'd been coached and was just going to repeat the same story enough, and Jimmy was smart enough to include different details each time.
Yeah.
So it kind of seemed like there was a lot going on at a lot of levels. Not that I don't know how the hell I had time to think about that while the most tense shit in the world was going on, but.
But see, it is neat to keep repeating. Okay, tell me again. Tell me again. That's where it opened the door for Kim to be he doesn't trust anybody. He's on his own.
And unlike other scenes that we've talked about, even in this episode, as well as other episodes, where, okay, we know blah, blah, blah. We know Jimmy's going to be okay because we know he survives. And he's also the star of the show and whatever, or Mike, whatever. Here we have a scene where we don't know what might happen with Kim. We don't know for sure what's going to happen with Lalo. Lalo is referenced in Breaking Bad, but it doesn't mean something might not happen here. So it definitely added to that. Whereas because that's who I think we're more afraid for, because Kim's the unknown quantity here.
It's like Mike said, it's not the end of the story.
Right.
I think one thing we can be glad of now, and maybe not. Just because of it increases the quality of the show, not just for our tension level, but the people that run the show are mature enough to not lean on the fact that everybody's worried about what's going to happen to Kim, and they're not going to go to this every fucking episode to try to stress us out. They're just going to tell the story, and that's going to be that. They're just not going to fucking throw this shit in our face all the time. And I appreciate that a lot, just because it treats us we're not easily manipulated schlubs, and I appreciate not being an easy manipulated schlub.
Well,
and not on the same line as Kim, but can we just throw out another great thing about this show is I think it's the last we're going to hear of him, but I appreciate the fact that Fred from Travel Wire got one more shout out to the guy. It's the character that doesn't go away, but I really loved that Jimmy brought him up. I don't know. I think that's one of the moments where we got to see his true feelings and everything. Mm-hmm. That it's still bothering him.
Well, I would also say that with this episode, compared to say the last two, he certainly has. Maybe going through what he's gone through, especially since he's been back, he's definitely more quote unquote Jimmy than he's been. He's not Saul really in this episode.
No,
he's pretty much. I mean, even you can say even his smart ass cracks, in when he's get with the bail money. That's something that Jimmy went to said as well. So I don't think there's any difference there. It's just it becomes interesting. With the trauma he just went through and the way he reacts to everything and processes everything, and Mike trying to talk him through it, how you get past that. At what point does this character go from being the way he is here to the way we see him a few years later, where he talks pretty openly and often about, well, maybe you should kill this one or kill that one, Belize and all that other stuff. Whenever he's talking with Walter and Jesse stuff, because he's certainly nowhere near that way of thinking at this point in time. So I'm just curious if, obviously there's not enough time this season. I'm wondering if by the time this show ends, if he will have hardened enough for that way of thinking to make sense for that character. Because right now he's nowhere near there. But maybe this starts him on that road, that bad choice road, if you will.
I love that the writers are giving us this too, because for a good season, 2 seasons, we're like, okay, Jimmy's going to turn into Saul, and it was kind of hard to watch and unpleasant because you're like, okay, he's turning into an ass. Albeit a charismatic, entertaining ass, he's turning into an ass. And he's got good people around him, but he's being a jerk. But now you're kind of like, okay, you sort of need to be this guy to get through what you are about to go through.
Bingo. Perfect. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that I think we used to conceptualize was going to be a character, but I think we see that Saul is like a coping mechanism or a suit of armor Jimmy puts on to do what he normally wouldn't do. And it'll be interesting to see how that transition is, because it's not going to be, hey, I changed my name and changed a suit. It's going to be some deeper level transformation.
Right.
Well, they kind of hinted and foreshadowed at this at the very beginning of the season in the present day or flash forward or whatever you want to call it with Gene. At the very end of that, he suddenly boldens up, and one would say he might be getting his Saul Goodman on, where he says, no, I'm going to handle this myself. And he goes from being a coward to looking like he's going to fucking take out these guys himself. And now we've seen how that's kind of been playing out in this past version with Jimmy, and and maybe this is the trauma he has to go through in order to get there, I guess.
Yes. I like that they're making us okay with it.
Yeah, which because I think we've all been, it's what you guys just said. We've all been like, oh, I kind of like Jimmy. Jimmy's a nicer person than Saul is. I could have a drink with Jimmy. Saul, I wouldn't trust him. So unless Jimmy tried to sell me a coin, then different story. I'm trying to think if there's anything that we wanted to mention here. No, it's just the only other thing I wanted to very quick thing. The one thing we're still waiting for in the series, we've got one more episode we've got one more episode to go. I know I saw a quick flash of a couple moments in the episode, but that doesn't mean anything. Are we going to get a scene next week, or are we going to have to wait till the quote unquote final season? Because technically still Mike and Kim have not had a scene quote unquote together. We're getting close. He was he's outside with the rifle. He's listening. So he's gotten to hear her. And he only found out about her, the details about her just like in the previous episode. He was the one to say that she's in the game to begin with, and now she kind of proved his point.
Right.
I'm kind of dying to see those two play off each other, because that's the one thing we haven't. Because once upon we finally got to see Mike and Chuck have that scene, way back when. I kind of want to see. It's 5 seasons of the show. They're like the 2 of the 3 main characters, and these 2 have still not been on screen together. I'm kind of waiting for that to happen.
I could be wrong on how they write it, but just as the characters go, I would have a hard time believing that Mike wouldn't quickly have a soft spot for her.
Oh, absolutely. I think he'd have a ton more respect for her and the way she is than he ever felt about Jimmy. I think with her, and and maybe I'm just spitballing here, obviously. He would sense in her there's more of a sense of ethics and a code to her than Jimmy has ever had, and I think he would right off the bat respect that about her. That's the way I would look at it, at least.
And just a really solid shoulders of right and wrong and how things are.
Dan, what were you gonna say?
I think she's probably gonna like him too. She just might not like call him pop like she's fucking like 1 year old. But bring me some Cheetos, pop.
Oh my god, an hour and 45 minutes. Okay, all right. Are we done? I think we better wrap this sucker up. Wow, I didn't realize we talked for that long. Holy crap. It was a great episode, that's why. Is there anything else? Brian, you usually have that one more... You're usually like Columbo with just one more thing. Do you have just one more thing before I wrap this up?
No, I think we've covered it.
Wow.
I've got one more thing.
Oh, okay. That works.
Something we missed out on last week, I think that we need to address it now. It's really not that important, but I just feel like we should address the gas cap.
Oh, the gas cap. The callback for the gas cap, yes. Dan, were you the one who mentioned that first in the post-podcast thing?
Yeah.
Refresh our listeners' memory so they know what the heck we're talking about.
We forgot to mention last week that Mike took the gas cap off Jimmy's Subaru as a callback to the legendary Spring organization planning a GPS tracker in his vehicle way back in the day. Sad. But there was a lot going on last week, so it's acceptable for us to miss it.
It was just a fun moment, and once we realized we had forgotten to mention it, it needed its due credit.
Yeah.
Just had to get one more Subaru comment in there, didn't you? Just had to get bigger than a Subaru. All right.
I'm sorry, Pop. I'll stop bringing that up.
I'll stop saying the F word and I'll stop bringing up Subarus.
It's been such a great birthday. All right. So if you enjoyed this podcast, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't, then you probably enjoy hanging out on the Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page and join the conversation about television series like Better Call Saul. Go back in time, talk about Breaking Bad, or talk about pretty much anything else there if you like. You can also find us on iTunes. Type in Serious TV Drama Podcast. Subscribe to the feed, where you can also rate and review us. You can also comment on Facebook and just say, congratulations on a great podcast. Anyway, you can also... I think I'm more in shock that he listened to it. I'm just more in shock he listened. That's all. I'm thinking.
Tonight I got feedback from serial killer David Gott that said to tell everybody hello, and also that the podcast has been great lately. So there's some more official feedback from serial killer, creepy dead eyes David Gott.
I love that there was someone who commented on Facebook on that picture I put up there, not realizing what was going on. I was like, what is this? Is this for real? I was like, yes, there's going to be a third season of Mindhunter with this nondescript, glass wearing. Anyway, what was I going? Oh, if you Google Serious TV Drama Podcast or STVD Podcast, you'll find us in a bunch of other places as well, including Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast, as in STVD, as in Serious TV Drama, or Scott TV Dan. I don't know. That's it for now. We will be back next week with the season finale of Better Call Saul. So if we spent like an hour and 45 on the penultimate episode, so pretty much penciled in for like a 2.5 hour podcast, because we don't know. I don't know how to shut up or something. There is still a possibility we might do an Ozark one. It depends on when everyone's all ready to do it. You're done?
I'm done. I finished. Yes, I did.
By the way, I'm going to predict right now we'll be able to cover an entire season of Ozark faster than we did this one episode of Better Call Saul. I'm just saying it. But I don't care. And I don't know. Did you finish?
It's no top tier show, but I
I
think
know.
it was good before you might have something to say about it.
I'll reserve my opinion, Dan. I'm not telling you my opinion ahead of time.
Ooh.
Oh,
Nice.
Jamie, have you gotten back and finished Hunters yet, or are you still lingering on that?
No, I have my one episode left. I wanted to finish. I wanted to finish Ozark. So now tomorrow night I finish up Hunters.
You should message me after you watch the final episode and tell me your opinion on that one, because that's pretty much the make or break episode for that series.
Will do, Bucky.
Spoiler. All right. Did I mention all the other things we supposed to say at the end? I believe we have. It's too late to do any kind of song thing. I'm not in the mood. So maybe next week. I was like, it's going maybe driving down for a long. Anyway, with all that said, I'm going to start the good nights. Thank you, Brian and Jamie, for making our podcast pop once again. Dan, thank you for being awake and alert, and thank you to everyone out there who actually listens. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Thomas Schnauz. Thank you for the entertainment.
I know I stand in line until you think you have the time to spend an evening with me. And if we go someplace to dance, I know that there's a chance you won't be leaving with me. Then afterwards we drop into a quiet little place and have a drink or two. And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like I love you. I can see it in your eyes that you despise the same old lines you heard the night before. And though it's just a line to you, for me it's true and never seemed so right before. I practice every day to find some clever lines to say to make the meaning come through. But then I think I'll wait until the evening gets late and I'm alone with you. The time is right, your perfume fills my hair, the stars get red and all the nights so blue. And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like I love you. Time is right, your perfume fills my hair, the stars get red and all the nights so blue. And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like I love you. Despite the same old lies you heard the night before. And though it's just a line to you, for me it's true and never seemed so right before. I practice every some clever lines to say to make the meaning come through. But then I think I'll wait until the evening gets late and I'm alone with you. The time is right, your perfume fills my hair, the stars get red and all the nights so blue. And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like I love you.